think we have some opportunity in science and religion as a way to talk about who we are as people and who we were as kids growing up. Because when we were little, I was the religious one, and you were the scientist, or you were the mathematician. You liked math, and you were good at it. You're getting good grades in just about everything. And then somewhere in our lives, we flip flopped, and I made my whole career, my education, my career was all in science and the scientific method and a critical way of thinking. And yours, you ended up going into religion, also critical thinker, but a very different way of
Hmm.
approaching the world.
So I'll start off with a story. Okay, I'm telling secrets now. So when I decided to go into the seminary, first of all, if you're listening for the first time and you're hearing that I went to the seminary, don't hold it against me because my journey has been anything but typical in that arena. But when I decided to go to the cemetery,
Oh, oh no. Oh no.
I just did that. Oh no. I mean, that's not okay.
You
Oh,
you
okay.
don't see a very authentic, genuine Freudian slip very often.
That was so okay. Particularly as the thought that follows.
Oh no. Okay.
When I decided to go to the seminary, I was still pretty young. I'd only been out of college for 4 years, I think. And our dad said to me, "Do you mean to tell me that I spent all that money on your education just for you to go to the seminary and be a pastor?" Because he didn't realize that a seminary is degree is actually a master's degree. I think he thought it was like a tech degree, which would have been fine. No hate to people who get tech degrees. We need you. He just didn't think that it was worth all that and more. But what it turns out is that getting a master's degree does, in fact, require a little bit of critical thinking. And in the end, I not only got my master's degree, but then about 5 years later, I went back and I got a doctoral degree. It's a doctor of ministry in biblical preaching, which is not a medical degree. It's not a PhD, but it's my doctoral degree. So I'm proud of it, despite the fact that it took less critical thinking than a scientific degree. So, what did you do for your educational journey?
I wanted to go to medical school. And so as an undergrad, I was studying for pre-med. And then I did the typical pre-med activities like riding along in an ambulance and doing volunteer work at hospitals. And I realized I didn't really like sick people, and that's not a great start for a medical doctor. And I also was doing the prerequisites research in labs. And I realized that I really, really loved that. I loved the scientific method. I loved discovering things. I remember sitting at a microscope late one evening and I had discovered something very minor but obscure. And I realized that no one else on the planet knew that thing that I knew. And again, it was very, very small, but no one else knew it because I just discovered it for myself. And through that experience, I realized that I wanted to go back to grad school. I graduated undergrad with a Bachelor of Science in Cell and Molecular Biology. And then I got into UC Berkeley and I studied neuroscience to get my neuroscience PhD there.
Whoa, damn, girl. A neuroscience PhD.
Let me back up too. Damn, girl, you got a master's and a doctorate in divinity.
So that was our journey. And again, I want to say, I have utter respect for people whose educational journey is different. For me, it doesn't really matter um, what your educational path is. What matters more to me, as far as like the people I want to hang around with, is are you a critical thinker and do you have the capacity to think beyond yourself? So for me, that's more important even than the educational journey. So, how does your scientific brain help to shape how you see the world?
I question everything to a point. I don't I don't believe my own my own gut feeling as much. It certainly shapes it in that way. I approach everything from as much of a factual and scientific perspective as possible. I used to hate being emotional. And I think that was part of it, that I was trained to follow fact and emotion didn't have anything to do with it. However, I do believe that there are things about ourselves that we don't yet understand. So, as an example, I believe in manifestation. So, if we manifest something,
Yes, me too.
then it's not because there's some force in the universe that we throw out our manifest and it comes back to us through this unknown force.
Mhm.
Manifestation is just training yourself to look for things, look for opportunities, look for patterns, look for ways to do things that you weren't open to seeing before. So to me, it is a very
Mhm.
explainable phenomenon, and it does work for those reasons, but not because of some extra power.
So, okay, so let's talk very briefly about manifestation because manifestation is a very spiritual concept. But here's what I actually think. So, first of all, the way I define manifestation is that the way that it's kind of generally understood right now is you put out into the universe the kind of energy you want to get back from the universe. And the thing is that I think that most people manifest, even if they don't know they're manifesting. And we have different language around manifesting. So people who are really deep into religion would call that prayer. Like, right? I put prayer out to God and then God returns to me some kind of answer that his hopefully matches the energy that I put out in the first place. For me, it's more manifestation really is just about energy and perspective like you just said. Like I I see in the world what I want to see in the world. And the thing is, by doing that, a lot of the times things come to me that I feel like had I not manifested, this wouldn't be coming at me exactly the way that it does. So then what I wonder is from a scientific perspective, is there something about actual energy? Because we talk about energy and in the spiritual world that's a very woo woo kind of like I've got energy floating out there. From a scientific perspective, if you put an energy out into the universe and it kind of circulates out there, isn't it possible that that energy does return to you like matching energy? Like, because it feels to me like the people who put out incredibly negative energy seem to be the people that everything's always turns bad for them. Right? Like they're always in this perpetual state of like the world is shitting on me. But it's exactly the energy they've put out. So I don't know if that's just a matter of perspective. I actually think there is a scientific energetic component to it. What do you think?
I'm completely in favor of that concept. Absolutely. That does happen. I have friends who are negative energy and they get negative things back to them, and some people who are just lucky and fall ass backwards into everything that's good. And the what I would argue about, which isn't even worth arguing about, is what the definition of energy is in that statement. So I don't believe that there's any
Mm.
kind of unidentified or undefinable vibe that comes off of us. I think it is how we speak to people, how we treat people, how we carry ourselves, what expression we have on our face, what we say when we talk to people, who we surround ourselves with. All of those things together could comprise that idea of energy. It's not unknowable, it's not undefinable, it actually is a thing, and that's my perspective. So if someone else wants to look at it as energy that's just a vibe or a thing that we can't see or touch, I'm totally in favor of that. I don't see it that way, but I'm totally in favor of that. Just because we don't want to put the effort into defining what we mean by energy doesn't mean that it's not the same exact thing.
So I've been thinking about this for years and years and years, decades, maybe even decades. Because when I was in college, I moved away from home and I was like a 10-hour drive. So I was not able to go home all that often, but I was able to make phone calls. And so when I was calling, I was connecting through words, but it wasn't the same. It was not the same as being in person. And then when things started to shift and we were able to do face to face, like video conferencing, I could video. So you and I get on FaceTime and we just hang out for hours and hours. Even sometimes we're not talking, but we're hanging out. The thing is, it is still not the same as being in person. And my theory is that actually being person to person, that there is a physical energy that is exchanged when you're in proximity with a person that is different because this is communicating, this is putting out an energy. This is, you know, us relating to each other, but it's not the same thing. When you're physically here, it's a completely different feeling for me, and I think that there's a real energy there, and that's why in-person contact is a different thing than this face-to-face and communicating on.
So I 100% agree that it's not the same thing to be face to face versus communicating on the phone or FaceTime or Zoom or MS Teams or any of those things. I do think, though, that it's explainable. Not that I'm able to explain it, but I think that at least three things. One, there's a allowance for silence on the phone, or oh, sorry, there's an allowance for silence hanging out in person that we don't always have on the phone. Now, you and I have mastered that art of silence. We just do our stuff. We cook, we do the hobbies, we take
Mhm.
care of whatever we need to take care of, folding laundry, and we can have that silence. And I think that helps bring us a little bit closer to that feeling of in person. But I think there are two other things as well. One is the physical touch. So definitely people
Mhm.
need 10 hugs a day. I believe that, even if I'm very scientific, I think people need 10 hugs a day, or 10 pat you on the shoulder per day. And if I'm with friends and I like them, then I'm going to be touching them on the shoulder, on the back, whatever it is. I'm big believer in the physical touch, and that's something we don't get when we're not physically together. And then the third thing is context. So you and I are on the phone, and I know that I'm folding laundry, and I know that you're cooking a meal or doing cares for your son. I know that that's what's happening, but I don't see your actions in the context of the room or of what you did before or
Mm.
how much you have left to do. All I can see is through the screen. So I think 100% it's different to be in person versus talking to each other on the phone or FaceTime. It's not the
Mhm.
same, but I do think still that there are reasons that it's different that we can explain if we put the effort into it.
I was not suggesting that it's unexplainable.
Okay.
I was suggesting really just that it's something. And I think for me, the one about touch makes a lot of sense to me. So we know, and there is scientific data that physical touch is good, that babies who have not been touched um, languish, they do not thrive.
Right.
So I think there is absolutely something to physical touch. I also, and maybe this is a spiritual thing, maybe this is not explainable, but I also believe that even this much close together or this much close together, I still think that there's an energy exchange, even if you're not physically touching, that people need.
So I don't want to be that nerd, but I am. So
That's fine. You be as nerdy as you want to be.
there's a lot of work that's come out in the last 5 to 10 years about the microbiome, right? So we
Okay.
know that a big proportion of our body is made up of bacteria and other kinds of cells that aren't human cells, and that's just the way biology works. And I believe a lot of those things put off what you would call energy, what I would call scent,
Hmm.
or the well, pheromones. And there are a lot of things that are driven off of the body due to self and due to these bacteria, especially bacteria on the skin. And if other microbiome on another person are able to pick up on the signals from my microbiome, and if it does something to each other's microbiome, then I do think that that's being in the same room with someone makes a difference.
Yes. So we're in agreement.
Yes, we've
Okay.
been in agreement this whole
So we're
time,
in
just different
agreement. Okay.
perspectives.
So as far as it, no, let's wind our way back because this is how I go. My thoughts, bing, 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 bing. And then I go backwards, bing, 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 bing. And so original thought was manifestation. So
Yes.
I think that whatever microbiomes, pheromones, energy, whatever you want to say, whatever I am putting out into the universe is the kind of thing that I'm going to be attracting back in real life, in
I think there's more
IRL.
to it. There's the putting out in the universe, whatever you want to call that. We could call it energy, and it could be explainable, not explainable. It could be biological. It could be energy vibes, whatever we want to call that. I agree that that's happening, but there's a second component of it, and that is the internal component. What am I going to focus on? What do I identifying what I want, paying attention to things. As an example, years back, I had enough money to buy a car, and I wanted to get the exact car that I wanted. I'm a car person. I love that. So I investigated all these cars, and I landed on one car that I really wanted to buy. And I thought, no one in my neighborhood drives that car. I never see that car. So I don't want to be the one sticking out with that one car. And as I'm pondering this further over the month or two after that, I saw that car everywhere. Whereas I thought
Yes.
I had never seen it before. So it was just an attentional effect, attentional effect. And all of a sudden, I was going to pay attention to that, intentionally,
Yes.
intentionally attentive. And therefore, different things came into my view and my attention.
Absolutely. And I think what part of what you're talking about they call confirmation bias. Like
Yes.
we see what we expect to see. So if you are a person that expects the world to shit on you, all you're ever going to register is the world shitting on you. And this was part of the work that I had to do during my own healing journey. I had to rethink how I perceive the world. And I had to first acknowledge that I had a little bit of control over how I perceive the world. So, one of the very first therapists that I ever had, one time we were talking about this was way back before I was married and had children. And we were talking about, do I want to have kids someday? And at that time, I said, I just cannot imagine bringing kids into this world. And she said, what do you mean by that? And I said, this world sucks. And she said, really? Do you think so? Because I don't see it that way. I don't think the world sucks. And it was totally mind blowing to me that somebody could live in this same exact world and see it as not shit. And that was one of the first times that I really had to think through, okay, so it's the same world. The only thing that's different is our perspective. It was the first time I'd really given myself permission to shift my perspective and look at something differently.
It's amazing to me how starkly differently we can perceive things if we really want to look at it a different way. And I'm thinking back to a play I did when I was 20 something. It was an exchange between a man and a woman, and they were on the phone together and discussing how they missed each other at a restaurant. And the beginning of the conversation was something along the lines of she's in the restaurant and she's excited to see him and he's trying to get there and being late, and by the end the perspective had changed so much that she was afraid of him and he was a stalker or something like that, but it was the
Mm,
same words that were spoken over and over again, but slightly different tone and slightly different perspective, and it 180%
wow.
flipped that story. And I think we have the capacity to do that in the real world too. I
Mm-hmm.
remember too
Mm-hmm.
another lessons learned the hard way, or just a huge lesson that I learned in my life that actually changed everything for me, was that I was getting bitter. I was in corporate America for my first 5 to 10 years out of grad school, and I was getting frustrated at how difficult it was and how everyone was behaving badly and everyone had selfish motivations. And I would just treat everybody like they were out to get me. And someone said to me, completely out of the context of all of that, someone said to me, it's great to approach life if you assume everybody has the best of intentions. And I started to do that, and it changed everything. If there's
Mm-hmm.
an absolute asshole at work and I can't stand him, but I change my perspective to maybe he's trying to do the right thing. Maybe he's got the best of intentions. Maybe his goal is not what I thought it was. It changed everything for me.
Wow. I love that story about that play. Because that totally
Yes,
is. It's the same exact scenario, but the words that you put to it, the way that you describe it, um, completely changes how you perceive it.
completely. And this is all of life, really.
Yeah,
Even subtle
yeah.
things like meeting up at a restaurant, it can change everything, just how you look at it. And I think we, as you say, we have control over how we look at it, and we forget
Hmm.
that.
I think some people don't know yet. I think some people don't realize that they can. Like I do know some people in the world who float through the world as if they're on a raft in a storm. And they just sort of go whichever way the world and the storm and the perspectives and the all that stuff, they just sort of go with it. And they seem to have very little control or very little knowledge that they have any control over the way that their life goes. And a lot of times, the people that do that, and I can say this because I used to be this person, um, the the people that do that seem to be the most unhappy because all they ever see is what the world is doing to them. And they perceive themselves as victims, which I, of course, what that was my perspective once upon a time was that the world is this way and it is doing this to me and I have no control over it. And as soon as I shifted that perspective to I am the only person that can control my life and give him permission to do that.
Hey, If you like our content, please like and subscribe and comment. It helps the algorithm and it helps us develop more material.
Thank you.
So here's one of the problems that I see with the way that we raise children in this culture. We spend our children's entire childhood telling them what to do. Quite frankly, where they're going to go. We're going to go to church or not go to church. Are you going to do sports? Which sports? I mean, then they get a little bit of input, but for the most part, we control all of that. And school, you go to school whether you want to or not. And if you don't go to school, you're in trouble. And if you don't go to school and your parents are on board, then your parents get in trouble. Right? So like there's this very prescribed, and then all of a sudden you turn 18 and or you go to college and then you turn 22 and you're out in the world and you're like, okay, you're on your own now. And we haven't given our children any tools to even have a perspective that they now can control the choices that they make. We haven't given them the tools to know how to make those choices. And then we
I
just
think
expect them to go out into the world and do adulting and not suck at it.
I would argue that that transition happens between, in the US, that transition happens between high school and college. So in high school, you might have a car and you might have a curfew and you might have friends and you might have the different abilities to go different places. But in college, all of a sudden, there's no parent around. And if you wanted to stay out 3 nights in a row, you stay out 3 nights in a row. And I think most very stereotypical US high school students have a lot more, I don't know, support structure in their lives than college students do. And I think this is a huge problem of all of a sudden you've got all the freedom that you want. Maybe not all the freedom that you want, but relatively huge amounts of freedom and very little adult supervision. And I think it's a huge problem in kids adjusting to that kind of difference in their own freedom.
And I don't know that it's a problem that they have the freedom. I think the problem is we haven't equipped them for the freedom.
You're absolutely right.
But I think that our whole system is structured that way. Specifically because of school, I think. Because even
Mm-hmm.
if the parents work really hard to try to equip their children to know how to make choices, how to spend money, how to save money, how to, function as adults. We still have spent most of their childhood telling them you need to be here at this time and we will control your day. And at the end of the day, you can go and then you have to go home and have a control over how the rest of your evening is going to be. So even with the best of intentions, there is this structure that makes kids have to obey.
So the
And then
result
they
is,
get that freedom and don't know what to do with it.
yes. And I think what we were saying was the ultimate result of that is that we have a population of adults who don't know how to handle, who want to go back to that structure and they put structure on their own lives, or they give up that structure to society or to their employer or to their spouse and
Mm-hmm.
really look at the world like I don't have the freedoms that I would like to have because they don't know how to deal with it.
Exactly. Well, I love what you just said is that they give what could be the freedom to make choices about their own life to someone else, to their job or to their partner. And the problem with that is that then that just builds up resentments. Because now you're not only resenting, like when you're a kid, you kind of resent school because they make you go to school, but you just do it because you're a kid and you have to. When you're an adult and you feel like you should have this freedom, but you have voluntarily surrendered your freedom to somebody else or the choices for your life to somebody else, that's ultimately going to turn into resentment.
But let's look at the causes of that because I think it's not as easy as an adult we didn't have the tools to handle freedom and therefore we voluntarily have given over our freedom to someone else. I think our society is structured such that it's conditioned in us, and I'm not going to be gendered here, but it's conditioned in us to give up our freedom to our corporation. It's conditioned in us to give up our freedom, I think, as wives, to give our freedom up to husbands in many cases, or to give up our freedom to politics, police, whatever our society is. I think it's more than just a decision that we make to give up our freedoms. I think it's conditioned in us and we are told, and it's an easier way to be an adult to give up our freedoms, but it also leads to significant unhappiness. So we need to take that back. If only
Yeah,
it were as easy as 4 words. We need to take that back. 6 words.
You mentioned conditioning. And I think that that is one of the things that will continue to come up in our conversations, because the conditioning is hugely problematic if we get to adulthood and don't see it and don't challenge it. Because that conditioning can control you for your entire life, and you can live a miserable life your entire life if you never do the critical thinking to challenge whether or not that conditioning is really fact or truth
Or even good for you.
or even good for you.
So there's a corporate buzzword or buzz phrase, it is what it is. And this is what people say when they're voted out of an idea or their opinion hasn't been taken into account. And I absolutely hate the phrase, it is what it is. Because just taking the microcosm of corporate America, if you're in a role and you're not being heard or you're not being agreed with, and you say to yourself, it is what it is, that's giving up all of your power, but also all of your responsibility to change the way that it is. So as an example, the market is pretty bad because of such and such, because of the competitor. The competitor has a better adverse event portfolio or whatever. It's in the pharmaceutical industry. That's what I'm used to. And people say, well, it is what it is. But no, that's not what it is. It's our job to get a better safety profile or make a better story or create some sort of competition. It's not just it is what it is. It's almost never it is what it is. In real life, it's not it is what it is. Just as a hypothetical, a woman is married to a man who has a lot of control over her because she got married young, for example, or she was told by her parents her whole job in life was to marry someone who's then going to make decisions about her life. That's not it is what it is. That's not a good situation. And I feel like we could give back some of that power, but also responsibility to question, is it really what it is? Or is it something that I can actually affect a change and make better?
When you are conditioned to believe it is what it is not so simple as to just say to yourself, oh, I guess I can do it differently. There are scenarios where people stay in jobs or relationships or circumstances way too long because they don't know that they can do it differently, because they don't recognize that it is what it is isn't good enough. And even if they recognize it, they haven't yet built up the tools and the skill set to know how to move beyond it. So one of the things that I did when I was making that transition from floating on a raft, whichever way life happened to take me, to a place where I feel I at least have a little bit more direction for my life and a little bit of control over what direction that's going to be, is I stopped saying to myself, I don't have any choice. I don't have any choice. That's the one for me. That's my is it is what it is I don't have a choice. And I say, you always have a choice in how you respond. And people who don't believe that they have a choice get really mad when I say that. But the reality is, it's very rare that you don't have a choice. I mean, like, even if you're, let's say, imprisoned and your day as an adult is structured for you, you still have options of how to move through that day. So if you're just an average person working in a corporate environment, you still have choices. I stayed in jobs entirely too long sometimes because I thought I didn't have a choice. And most of the time that was financial. And I would say, well, I can't leave this job because I need the money. Because if I don't have the money, then, and I never finished that question until I did finish that question and it shifted for me. So I would say to myself, well, I can't leave this job because then I won't have the money. And I need the money in order to pay for the house and have the kids' activities and all the things. And then I realized, well, no, I have some other options. I can either go get another job that pays for the same, or I can quit this job and not have that same money, but spend differently, even if it means moving to a smaller place or spending less on clothes or being more deliberate about the choices I make for groceries. And I'm not talking about extreme poverty. I'm not talking about people for whom extreme poverty is a real issue. I'm talking about just like average Joes who are working in corporate world. we have more choices than we think we do. We could also continue to work the job and quietly quit, which is show up and be there, do the tasks, but not invest ourselves into the company. Right there's 3 choices, right? Get a new job, quit without a new job, or stay in the job and quietly quit. And every time I recognized that I had more choices then, I don't have a choice. It opened up my world to where I could then start making moves towards something different and towards something better.
So I have in my mind now a sock drawer, and you're looking for the best sock. You're looking for the sock that fits, doesn't have a hole in it, the elastic is still good, it's the right color, it matches the one you have in your hand. And you're looking through that drawer and you're looking for the right sock. And the more you move all those things around, all those socks around, the harder it is to find what you're looking for. But if you took each one out and you say, okay, well, that's not great, but looked at each sock as you did it and maybe organize those socks into great socks, medium socks, not great socks, then you're going to find
Mhm.
that good sock a lot easier. That might have
Oh,
made
yeah.
no sense, but that's what that's
No,
the way
it
my brain
totally
works.
does. So I've always taught my kids this, that when I have this like laid out in front of me and I'm like, I don't have a choice, like I have to do this. And then I remind myself, wait, I do have some choices. I say, write them all down on paper, like physically take a pen and paper, write these down, write down all of the choices, not only the good ones, but the silly ones and the terrible choices, right? Like I could just get on a bus one day and just like go boom, like straight to the coast. I'm not gonna, because the consequences of that would be more dire than some of the other choices I have. But when I write them all down and I see how much that I actually have, not only does it give me a perspective that I have choices, but it also opens up my mind so that I can envision real choices, like realistic, practical choices that I might not have if I had only stuck with I can either get a new job or keep this job. When I write down all the silly ones, like get on a bus and drive, it opens my mind up and then my practical options expand.
This brings us very beautifully right back to manifestation and that external
Mhm.
manifestation of putting out into the universe the energy that you want to put out, but also that internal component of focus and looking for things and paying attention to things. If you're only paying attention to, I've got to go to work and I hate it, and don't really take the energy to or the effort to write down those other things that you could pay attention to, like an opportunity, looking at a job market or talking to people who are in your industry or looking very specifically at your budget. That's the internal manifestation work of paying attention to those things that could be a way out of the situation that you're in.
I have heard some people who don't like the concept of manifestation, and they will say things like, manifestation isn't a thing. All it is you're seeing what you want to see, or you're going out and getting the thing you want because you know that that's the thing you want. And so you went and got it because you wanted it.
That's
Yeah,
manifestation.
that is it. That's the thing. It's not magic. It's not woo 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 woo. Like, that's exactly the thing. It's what you put out and expect to see is what you get back.
How dare you call that manifestation when it's just manifesting what you want?
Yeah. Duh.
So I think we could do a whole hour on specific steps that could be taken. And I think it depends on each person's individual circumstance. But I guess what I would love to convey and reiterate is that we do have choices and we can manifest for what we want. We just have to overtly, intentionally do that. Even if no action is taken, just the action of paying attention to different things than you're paying attention to today is going to make a difference.
I think the one other thing that I would want to qualify on this manifestation conversation is it's not always gonna be smooth. It's not always gonna come back the way you expect it to. And as soon as something doesn't go the way you wish, you can't give up then. You can't just be like, see, it didn't work. Or you can, but then you're stuck again. Like those places where you stumble, those places where you get stuck, or you're like, oh, shoot, that's not what I expected. That's not what I wanted. And I feel like it's just taken me 10 steps back is part of the process.
Right.
It's part of the journey. You have to be willing to accept that it's gonna suck sometimes and then push through that, because that's how you get to the thing that you are really wanting. And it's not always fast.
Right.
There were things that I really wanted to work toward, and sometimes I would take, like, the last time that I worked for somebody else, I spent a good year thinking through what I would want to do next, how I would afford it, making a plan, starting to save some money. Like, it took some time and it took some effort before I could actually then be like, I finally now can quit without the next thing. I don't know what the next thing's going to be, but I set myself up to a place where I can spend a little time building up what the next thing's going to be. And what it ended up being was I started a business that was successful, and I finally sold that business so that I could go on to the next thing I didn't know what was going to be. But it takes time and planning, and it takes moving through the times that it sucks.
This idea of thinking that all you have to do is decide that it's going to be that way and it will be that way, that's not how manifestation works. You're
No.
absolutely right. It's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of sucky time and sometimes a very long period of sucky time. But we have to look at weighing a lifetime of doing what we don't want to do right now versus an undetermined amount of time with doing stuff we don't want to do with the potential of something different around the corner.
Yeah, and I've heard people on that say things like, well, I can't go back to school because it's going to take 4 years. 4 years is going to pass. Do you want to still be in the job 4 years from now?
Maybe
Or
it'll
do
take you 8
you,
years.
or do
Maybe
you,
it'll take you
yeah,
10
and
years.
it might take you 8 or 10. But those 8 or 10 are going to pass whether you do the education piece or not.
Right.
So how do you want to spend that time? Because you do have a little bit of control over how you spend that time. And you can either spend that time, that 8 or 10 years, stewing over what you wish you had, or you can take the 8 or 10 years and go get it.
And this idea that there's never a good time for such and such, or it's not a good time right now for such and such, I think that is a self-limiting factor. There never will be a
Yes.
time where the heavens open up and say you have all the money in the world for childcare and your job is going to understand if you're gone for 4 out of 5 days, and therefore here's the cash you need to go back to school. That will never happen. You're going to have to walk into those sucky days where you're going to have to pick your kid up from school late and you're going to have your boss hating you and you're going to have to stay up late and do an assignment, whatever it is in your life that is going to be that sucky time, or even that less than ideal time or that less than comfortable time. It's still absolutely worth it, and it is a choice in front of you.
Yeah.
And there is never a good time, is my point. There's never a perfect time. Now is a good time.
Because 5 minutes from now is going to happen whether you make the choice to do it different or to do it exactly the same. So why not do it different?
Oh, and you're always going to have critics, and
Yes.
that doesn't mean
Yes.
that they're right. That's a huge point that I had to learn in life: is critics are not necessarily right.
They're very rarely right. Because
So
they're not living your life.
True, I would caveat, I check with my community, I check with my sister, I check with people who I really trust as a gut feeling, but those aren't my critics, those are my supporters.
Final thoughts on manifestation. I will qualify that I am more, it sounds so stupid. I am more spiritual than religious right now. And all I mean by that is I'm more attuned to my spirituality, my divinity, and how I move through the world than I am concerned about attending a church.
So I will qualify the conversation by saying that I am neither spiritual nor religious. I am a very thoughtful atheist, but I am a person
Mm-hmm.
who I go through the world with vision, with my senses, and I believe what I myself hear and see and perceive, and I believe what people I trust hear and say and perceive, but I'm not easily swayed to gain a different perspective until I've done the research myself, until I've seen it, tested it out myself. I'm not easily swayed.
For me, I'm less concerned about what I see and I hear, and I'm more concerned about looking inside and trusting my own gut to make a decision.
I think we have a significant overlap in the way that we perceive the world, and we use different terminology for it.
And I do think the place where we overlap significantly is that we don't live to please something or somebody else. I'm not moving through the world now to please God. I'm moving through the world to do what my gut is telling me is the way that I want to move through the world so that I can live in peace and integrity and groundedness. I think that you do the same thing. And I think you find your moral compass in places other than religion or God. So, what is it? Just briefly, as we wrap up this conversation, what is your moral compass pointing to? Or where does it come from?
I haven't really evaluated that, but I would say that I personally feel better when I'm doing good for the world, but like
Mm-hmm.
a lot better. I'm sick to my stomach when I don't do the right thing. And the right thing is what I perceive,
Yes.
not what I think the Bible is telling me or anything. It's what I perceive as the right thing to do, which is being kind to people, giving people room, giving people space, loving people, and trying to make sure everyone has enough and that they have their 10 hugs per day and all of those things that make me a happy person and make me miserable when they're not happening, when I'm not participating in that. So I think it's internal.
That is so interesting. So, your journey through the scientific lens and then my journey through the religious lens has really got us to the same point, which is that we both feel dysregulated when we are acting contrary to what our soul, spirit, brain, eyes, and ears are telling us to do.
Hey, Adlo, do you like your mom's content?
I do. Do you like it, Kiwi?
I really do. I like my mom's content.
It's
Hey,
amazing.
I can subscribe, please.
Like and subscribe.